We're now going to look at the circulatory system and the respiratory system, which are two very, very important body systems that work hand in hand together. The circulatory system is kind of like the transportation system. It's responsible for meeting the needs of all the individual body cells that you find that they might need food or oxygen or carrying away waste products. So the major functions of the circulatory system would be to carry anything that's needed to the cells. Like I said, that might be oxygen, it might be food, it might be other minerals, anything that's needed for the cells. And then it's also going to be responsible for carrying waste products away from the cell. So anything that the cell no longer has a need for, it's going to diffuse into the bloodstream, and the circulatory system would carry it away. It's also responsible for transporting those disease-attacking cells, those white blood cells. So it's got those floating around in it as well. Now, the major organs that you associate with the circulatory system would be the heart, the different blood vessels, and the blood itself. We have a very cool circulatory system, and it's one of the most efficient designs that's out there. Our heart in particular is very efficient, and it's set up so cool. It has two different types of chambers. You have chambers at the top part of the heart that are called atriums, and their job is to receive blood that's coming into the heart. And then you have the bottom two chambers that are called ventricles, and those are the pumping chambers, and they're responsible for pumping blood out of the heart. Now, if you just look at the right side of the heart, its responsibility is to deal only with oxygen-poor blood that's come back from the body. The body would bring blood and bring it it would flow into the right atrium, and then it would trickle down into the right ventricle. The right ventricle would pump that blood up to the lungs to pick up oxygen and to deliver or get rid of carbon dioxide. Once it's oxygen rich, then it comes back to the heart. It would come back to the left side of the heart. It flows into the left atrium, and then it flows down into the left ventricle, which then is going to pump blood out of the heart. So that's what makes up the double loop system. There are three types of blood vessels that we find in the circulatory system, and they're all very cool. They all carry blood, but they all have a very different job. The first one are arteries. Arteries are responsible for carrying blood away from the heart. Because they have to withstand that really strong pressure of the heartbeat, they have to be extremely muscular. So they have a very smooth layer on top of them to help that blood flow without friction, and then a much larger muscle tissue that surrounds them so that they can withstand that heartbeat. And so they are going to carry that blood away from the heart, and they start out pretty large from the heart, and then they branch off to smaller and smaller arteries until they branch all the way down to capillaries. Now, capillaries are the blood vessels that actually deliver the food or materials to the body cells. Materials diffuse into the cells and out of the cells in the capillaries, and they're so tiny and thin, only one cell can go through at a time. So it's a very slow process of going through, so that diffusion or osmosis, active transport, can take place. The capillaries will then branch back into, they kind of combine forces, and they get a little bit larger, and they form veins, and veins are responsible for bringing blood back to the heart. Now, what's really cool with veins is that because they're on the tail end of it and they're not getting the full force of the heart's pump to get that blood going, and they have to fight against gravity very often, they have really cool chambers that hold the blood between pumps. So they have little valves in them that open up when the heart beats to push the blood up, and then it closes off real quick to hold the blood in chamber so it doesn't fall backward. So that's a really cool. Now it has more muscle tissue around it than a capillary does, but definitely not as thick as the arteries. Moving on to blood and what it's made of, we tend to think that it's just all blood. I mean, we don't tend to think of that it's made up of several different things. But the part of the blood that makes it flow is the plasma, and that's the liquid part. And that, if you separated it all out, would be kind of a yellowish color. That's going to be full of a lot of your water. So when you're dehydrated, your plasma is what's low on water, and so that's going to prevent your blood cells from moving efficiently throughout your body. The other major part of your blood is made up of the red blood cells itself, and the primary responsibility of red blood cells is to carry the oxygen to the cells. They're made up of hemoglobin, which is iron. It's gonna grab onto that oxygen when it's in the lungs and hang on to it, and that's what's going to deliver the oxygen to the body cells. So if you have iron poor blood and you're tired all the time, that's because your red blood cells are not able to grab onto that oxygen and deliver it to the body cells. And you know that oxygen is necessary for cellular respiration to occur for you to get that energy that you need. The white blood cells are really large, and they're white. Those are your disease fighters, and there's several different kinds of those that are out and about, but we won't go into great detail with them in this particular PowerPoint, but they're your disease fighters. They're out patrolling, and they're the soldiers, the army that's out there. The platelets are also part of your blood, and they don't have a nucleus. They're not a full cell. They're just like cell fragments. And their job is to produce fibrin, which is to clot your blood. So when you get a cut and you're bleeding, it doesn't take too long and then you stop bleeding. And that's because the fibrin, I like to think of it as like Spider-Man shooting a little spider web all over the place over where the cut has happened into the blood vessel there. And usually that's the capillaries where that happens, but it'll produce that fibrin, which kind of weaves in the weaves up the opening so that the cells can't pour out. So when you think about it, when you're bleeding, all of your plasma and your red blood cells and maybe a few white blood cells and some bunch of platelets, that's all spilling out. That's something cool to think about, huh? If you look at this picture, you can see that the red blood cell is kind of a donut. To me, it kind of looks like a jelly donut shape. It's red, that's why they call it red blood cells. And it's going to be very flexible. So as it's moving through your blood vessels, when it hits where the arteries or veins will split off, it's able to flip around a little bit easier, and that's about the width of your capillaries. So they are really tight. They touch the sides of the capillaries as they travel through. The white blood cells are much larger. Now they live a lot longer than the red blood cells. I can't remember. I don't think that the red blood cells live more than 3 months. The white blood cells have a nucleus in them, unlike the red blood cells, and they're going to live much longer. And then you can see the platelets. They kind of look weird. They're not very big, but they're kind of cool looking, I think. Okay, now we're moving on to the respiratory system. And the function of the respiratory system is to move that oxygen that you find in the outside environment inside the body. And so it's going to move it into the lungs. And then it's also going to remove the carbon dioxide that is a waste product from your body cells, and the water from your body cells. Those are both waste products from cellular respiration. The respiratory system is responsible for getting rid of that from your body. The major organs that are involved, or a major part of the respiratory system, would be the nose, the trachea, and the lungs. The cool thing about the nose, I want to tell you, we all kind of think our nose is gross, and it kind of is, but mucus is your friend, and that nose is responsible for cleaning the air that comes in, because you're inhaling all kinds of gunk, dirt, and small organisms. So it's responsible for trying to filter those out. It's going to warm the air up so that it's your body temperature, and it doesn't cause your throat and lungs to hurt as you breathe in. And it also moistens it so it tries not to dry it out. So when you inhale through your nose, you're moistening that air. So your nose is really a very important organ in this system. The trachea is kind of a connector tube, and it's flexible. It's made out of cartilage as well, and as you know, the cartilage on the bones. So it's flexible, and it's going to just be a passageway that carries the blood down to the lungs. Now, the lungs, we have two, and they contain bronchi, which are the tubes that branch off. It will branch down to what's called the alveoli. And I'm going to hang on just a second and tell you about the alveoli on the next slide. This is a picture of what the alveoli would look like. And you can see on here the bronchial tubes. They have some large ones, and those are the major ones, and then it branches off into smaller ones, and it branches off until it gets to these, it almost looks like grapes, like a cluster of grapes. And you can see that each one of those grape-like structures, the alveoli, is covered with blood vessels. And those blood vessels are capillaries. And you can see that some of them are red and some of them are blue. And even though our blood's not blue, it's using the color blue to differentiate the oxygen-poor blood from the oxygen-rich blood. And so what happens when you inhale, that oxygen comes down, it'll travel all the way through the bronchial tubes down into the alveoli, and it diffuses into the oxygen-poor blood that's surrounding it in those capillaries. And so the oxygen will diffuse into the bloodstream. Now that bloodstream is oxygen poor, but it's high in carbon dioxide. And so that carbon dioxide and water will then diffuse into the alveoli. So you have a gas exchange that's happening there. You've got the oxygen going into the bloodstream and the carbon dioxide and water exiting the bloodstream. And so this is a very, very efficient way to get rid of waste products and get in those necessary products. And to me, this is so cool, the way that it's set up so efficiently. Again, this is just another picture to kind of give you just another viewpoint of how the alveoli works and how the diffusion happens. You can see the alveoli is surrounded by the capillaries, and then you've got the exchange of gases in the picture on the right, where you can see where oxygen poor blood is indicated by the gray looking color, and then the oxygen rich blood is the red, so you've got the oxygen going into the red blood cells and the carbon dioxide exiting it. So you can see how closely the respiratory system and circulatory system work to deliver the necessary oxygen to the body cells and get rid of the waste products from the body cells. So the circulatory system is very, very involved in helping the respiratory system accomplish its job.